Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. Hello and welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Les. Welcome to a new show. I thought that it'd be a little bit interesting to get two different perspectives on all of the news coming out in the NRL. It also holds me accountable to go through the news as well. I know that we're a little bit inconsistent on the podcast when it comes to going through news and updates when they happen. But I've got Isaac here, obviously doing a bit of journo work at the moment for Zero Tackle, works with the ABC, producing over there as well. And he's going to go through some of the headlines and things like that he's written. And then we're going to go through it together. But first off, Isaac, mate, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. Really keen to kind of get stuck into what we got going on in footy, and keen to just be on the podcast. I've been a fan for a while, so it's good to be here.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, appreciate it. So I obviously just blankly went through your background, but just go through in a bit more detail as to your background in journalism.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, as you said, I'm a NRL writer for Zero Tackle. So, basically just covering the biggest stories or the trending stories in footy at the moment. I am, a huge, Bulldogs fan myself. So, I love my footy. But yeah, I just do a bit of writing over there, mostly article writing, just on the, current news or, opinion pieces as well. And I also do some international producing over there, ABC. So managing the content and stuff that kind of goes onto the news the next day. A lot of work with the TV guys and the camera guys over there as well. And I'm also studying journalism at the moment. So I'm in my last year of uni at the moment, just finishing up over there. So I'm doing a few things at the moment, but obviously my biggest passion is rugby league and my work for Zero Tackle. So that's kind of what I'm here for today. So yeah.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. Look, let's get stuck straight in because there's a lot here. There's a lot that you've got here. And I'm loving a few of these headlines already. So get stuck into it. What do you have first for me?
So one of the, I think potentially not the biggest story, but probably the most interesting one that I found that I worked on recently. Andrew Johns came out last week proposing a new rule in footy, something that I guess is a little bit left field. He proposed a 5-point try. So basically what he kind of thinks is, as a lot of the games have been like super exciting this year, a lot of really close matches. There's also been a couple snooze fests, a couple boring games where, in the last 20 minutes or so, the results kind of decided. Teams are playing super safe footy because, they don't want to give up more points. And especially at this time of the year, everyone is kind of playing it safe. So Joey basically, he came on his show and he basically spoke about wanting to introduce a 5-point try when you're coming out of your own 40. So basically what he recommends is, especially in late game situations, if you're down by, let's say, 6-8 points, if you have come out of your own 40 and you go on to score a try in that set, he recommends that you should, in that, get 5 points as opposed to 4 points. And then obviously you'd get 7 points with a converted try. And so it would reward a little bit more attacking football, a little bit more exciting football, which, again, I guess kind of has been the direction that footy's been wanting to go in the last few years. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Obviously, we've had a lot of rule changes in the past few years, and this could be something that the NRL does look into. There are a few things in it that, it could go wrong or it could kind of mess up the flow of the game a little bit, but it's definitely an interesting one. And I thought it was worth noting from Andrew Johns over there.
100%. And, yeah, as you said before, it does promote that attacking style of football. It would make games a lot more exciting. Players going for those 5-point tries and trying to get them back into games, especially, for example, if a field goal's kicked, there's about 5 minutes to go. They could go for a 5-point try, the opposition team, and get back into the contest and be level with the opposition. So it does, I guess, promote that. I really like it. I think that Andrew Johns, he's a good thinker. He comes up with some pretty good ideas himself. So it's not a bad idea. What are your general thoughts about it?
Look, I guess it goes two ways. So obviously, and I think a lot of NRL fans, they're not huge fans of change, especially in the sport. But we have seen that there have been rule changes in the past that really have kind of pushed the game to another level. So I've got a few here that, whether, recently or or kind of, in history that have kind of sped up the flow of the game a little bit. So most recently, as you know, the biggest rule change has been the 2-point field goal. And I think that was kind of a really big thing that, NRL fans weren't super on board with at first, but really has kind of promoted, like, especially in late game situations, a really exciting brand of football. You've also got the set restarts, the 6 agains that was introduced back in 2020. Again, really sped up the flow of the game, kind of stopped, all the stoppages as much as they could. And then you go back to the 70s when, you introduce the 6 tackle sets as opposed to just a free-for-all. So all of these rule changes did kind of promote an exciting brand of football and a faster brand of football as well, which I guess NRL fans have really been on top of. But my issue with it is, while it does kind of promote a fast-paced game, it also does invite a lot more risk of, head-high tackles and injuries when the game's kind of gone really fast. And I think that's something that the NRL has also been trying to stop. So I guess it's kind of, pick your poison. Do you want the game to be going super fast, super exhilarating, and risk, a few more of those sloppy plays? Or do you want to, just focus on the entertainment side of things and just get the most exciting brand of football? So I think it really does go both ways. I don't mind it, but I think a little bit more thought needs to be put into it.
100%, 100%. Well, look, I'm keen to see if the NRL does take this on board. And guys, let us know in the comment section below. What do you think about this rule change? Do you think that it should be implemented? And who do you agree with more in regards to the arguments there for that 5-point try? Mate, what's the next one you got there for me?
Yeah, so our next one, an interesting one. Peter V'landys potentially looking at a change in careers. So Buzz came on his show last week, Buzz Rothfield, and reported that Peter V'landys is kind of looking at picking between 2 of his current roles. So as most footy fans would know, V'landys is currently the chairman of the ARLC, so the Australian Rugby League Commission. So he is currently the chairman of that. But he's also the boss of Racing New South Wales. And so it's been reported now that he is kind of tossing up between, picking the NRL or picking racing. And so he's been over at racing for 21 years, while he's been with footy for about 6 years now. So he's tossing up between the two. Buzz has come out and said he's more likely to pick the NRL, but there are a few implications in terms of money, salary, and how it would work between him and Andrew Abdo. So there is a little bit of risk of footy losing Peter V'landys. And if we do, it could, have, major implications, not only on the game, but today, but in the game in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So
100%. I mean, V'landys, what he's done in the game at the moment and all of the rules that he's brought in, all of the sanctions that he's brought in as well, it's really helped improve the game. He's done so much for the game. I mean, in his time, the Dolphins have come into the competition. We're looking to bring PNG into the competition as well. I think that he's done so much for the game. To lose a guy like Peter V'landys, I think that you're risking the game going into shambles. So I think that, the other bosses there in rugby league, they need to try and keep him in that chair because he's done so much for the game at the moment. In regards to your general thoughts, mate, what are some of the implications that you could see happening if we do get him choosing to go to racing instead?
Look, I think the biggest thing at the moment, obviously, like you said, he's had major, he's brought major improvements to the game in terms of rule changes, as well as, obviously introducing the Dolphins, which have been a smash hit. They've been awesome for the league. The biggest thing, though, is, and a lot of fans may already kind of be aware of this, but the NRL is looking to bring in a new TV deal in the next couple of years. So as many would know, NRL has been on Channel 9 for decades now. But there has been talk of the NRL signing a multi-million-dollar deal to essentially potentially go to another streaming service, another channel, another provider. And if we don't have V'landys kind of at the helm helping steer the ship, that may cost the NRL a lot of money and a secure deal for the next decade. So in terms of where the game could be in the next 10 years, it pretty much relies on Peter V'landys and where he decides to go. And so, like I said, it is reported that V'landys is leaning towards footy a little bit more. There have been internal conflicts in Racing New South Wales between him and other parties that has kind of pushed him towards choosing the NRL as well. The biggest implication here is the salary, like I said earlier. So Volandis is on $1 million a year at the moment over at Racing New South Wales. Whereas with footy, he's only on around 150, 200K a year. So it does have it's a major difference between salaries. So if he were to kind of stay with the NRL, him and other boss Andrew Abdo will need to kind of put together a plan that will increase Volandi's pay while also being able to keep Abdo in his role at the moment. So there is, it's not as straight cut as, Volandi's wanting to stay with NRL. There is a lot more to it. But yeah, we're just going to have to wait and see. He does say that he will make his decision this year. But as NRL fans, like, this could be, a really huge loss if we do lose Volandis.
Well, I think that's a big thing you bring up, mate, the difference in salary there. It's obviously, when he's trying to provide for himself, for a family, it definitely does come into account there. Obviously, being able to get that $1 million paycheck over at Racing. And then obviously, the difference here with rugby league, it's definitely a great point. In regards to streaming, I think that's probably an even bigger point in regards to the game and the fans. Even at the moment now, Channel 9, they only cover a certain amount of games. So, you've got to rely on Fox or on KO paid streaming services to get the rest of your games out for week to week. So securing a good streaming deal, but also getting a streaming service that is live, that is free, and that you get every single game on, I think that would be huge. I think that if you could get, whether it be Channel 9, whether it be Channel 7, which we've heard plenty of rumours about, I think that we could definitely get a better deal with Volandis at the helm. Is there any sort of word, I know I brought up Channel 7 then, but is there any other word in regards to channels that are in discussions at the moment for that deal?
Look, an interesting one that was reported a few weeks ago was actually moving somewhere like Netflix. Again, it really does depend, and I don't know kind of the ins and outs on how that would work. But there is talk about, something like Netflix, something like Amazon Prime potentially taking on footy. If you look at other sports, like, for example, like if you look at the NBA, they're currently streaming on Disney Plus. So there definitely is a market for it. And Netflix would pay, good dollar to get footy on there. But again, it depends, especially with most people moving to streaming services in the last 5 to 10 years. It definitely would be a reasonable move to like a streaming service like that. But again, if we don't have our lead guy there, it could all kind of fall apart and we could be left with nothing. So the biggest thing I've heard and kind of the craziest thing is potentially a Netflix or an Amazon Prime, but nothing's set in stone yet.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's going to be interesting too, because I think that goes back to the same point we sort of brought up with KO as well. Like, it's still a paid streaming service. Some people, I mean, if you don't have Netflix, what are you doing? But some people don't have Netflix, right? They don't have Disney Plus, they don't have Amazon Prime, and they wouldn't be able to access games week to week. So I think that having a Channel 9 or a Channel 7, a Channel 10 would be a wild one, particularly because they've got a big spot opened up. I think with their news service only covering a few set amount of things and doing playbacks and things like that now that they've sort of wrapped up there. There is a market to go over there. Be very interesting to see what happens with that one, and let us know what do you guys think? Do you think that it would be worthwhile getting the NRL to be streamed on Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, one of these sort of corporations, or would you rather it be on a Channel 9, Channel 7, and having it live and free to air? I think that that would probably be the more applicable option to a lot of NRL fans. Mate, what's next on the bucket list there?
Okay, so this is the one I'm looking forward to talking to probably the most. And again, it's something that probably everyone in NRL media and probably every NRL fan has spoken about as well. But the Sea Eagles officially confirmed the other day that DCE would not be staying at the club. Now, this is really interesting for a couple of reasons. I kind of took what the Manly Sea Eagles CEO kind of said during his press conference to be quite interesting. So his biggest point was saying that he was disappointed with DCE's decision, but respects it nonetheless. I found that by him kind of saying that, he's kind of implying that this was DCE's decision, which I thought was a huge thing. And there wasn't much explanation in their press release as to why DCE was leaving. But they have officially confirmed that, and I think the whole situation is truly bizarre, as you would know, and as most listeners would know as well. It's a truly bizarre situation.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely is. It's going to be really interesting to see where DCE goes. I think that there's been a few rumors regarding the Dolphins pulling out too. I think that they've pulled out of the race for DCE. So it seems like he's going to go to the Roosters for me. It
Yeah.
seems like that's where he's going to land. Does that seem the same way from you?
Look, honestly, I up until probably the last couple of days, I was thinking the Dolphins. But look, it's looking like the Roosters, and it wouldn't be the first time that the Roosters have done something like this. Obviously, most notable, most recent is Cooper Cronk from Storm to the Roosters. They don't mind bringing in those older veteran stars and kind of building a premiership side around them. I don't know if it will have the same effect, but honestly, I can't really see DCE going anywhere else. He does have a young family, and I doubt he'd want to, uproot him to Queensland. So no, I think I agree with you, mate. I see him going to Roosters as well.
So look, Dolphins have pulled out. What
Yeah.
other clubs are currently in the race for DCE?
At the moment, I'm only hearing the Roosters, so I'm
Okay.
not hearing anything else. The Dogs have also pulled out. The Dogs have come out and they've said that they won't. And honestly, I probably did have the Dogs kind of going for DCE, but they've pulled out. Dolphins have pulled out. I'm not hearing any other sides. No whispers from the Cowboys or anything like that. So look, all signs are pointing towards the Roosters, and something that I'm finding a little bit interesting. Obviously, DCE has made it set in stone that he will not be remaining at Manly. That makes me believe that a deal has already been done. Again, that's all speculation. Like, I haven't heard anything in regards to that, but I do think that his certainty with leaving and the way that it's all kind of played out, I do think a deal is probably already done for 2 years. Whether that's at the Roosters or somewhere else, I'm not too sure. But he has also mentioned that he's made this decision based on what's best for his family, and obviously being offered a 2-year deal from Manly as he did. Would have offered his family a lot of security. So that kind of does give me the idea as well that he has already signed somewhere else, and that a reveal, will be released in the next couple of weeks.
No, mate, I'm not sure how across you are with this one, but I do remember seeing something on my screen regarding DCE requesting an early release at the start of this year or last year.
Okay.
Is there any truth to that? Have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything to that personally. The last I've heard on that is that DCE had let Manly know or had made his decision back in December. But I haven't heard anything of an early release, or requesting an early release. But again, look, if that is the case, it even points more towards the fact that he already has, picked a new home for 2026 and onwards. But I'm not too sure if he's looking to leave ASAP. He's obviously come out in their most recent press release and made it clear that he is looking to win with Manly this year. So whether they've come to that decision recently or in the last couple months, I'm not too sure. But it is really interesting that rumors like that are coming out, because everything's pointing towards a deal already kind of being inked for DCE.
Yeah, well, look, it is going to be interesting to see what happens with him. It's pretty clear, obviously, now that he's not going to stay with the Manly Sea Eagles next year. It sounds like it's going to be the Roosters, but guys, let us know what you think in the comment section below. Would you like to see DCE at the Roosters? Mate, just a quick one before we move on. As a fan of the game, particularly away from the journalism side and what we've heard, where would you like to see DCE go in next year?
Look, as a fan of the game, I want him to stay at Manly, but obviously that's not going to be happening. I don't mind him at the Roosters. I don't mind it. Now, I know a lot of, there's always jokes about, Roosters and the salary cap and them always getting, but I do think he does fit in with the Roosters. I do think that he kind of fills that role perfectly. Another kind of destination that has been floated around, Scope was actually talking about it last week, was potentially DCE at Penrith. Now, I think that's interesting as well. I don't think it'll happen. But that's somewhere else where I wouldn't mind seeing DCE go, because I just love to see how that kind of, plays out. I don't want to see him going somewhere like the Dolphins or a rebuilding side. I want to see him in a win now situation. So my pick would probably be Roosters, seeing as that's the most viable option. But again, look, if it were up to me, he'd be staying at Manly.
Hey, it's funny you bring up Penrith because I watched the presser with Ivan the other day when he was asked about it. He didn't necessarily deny the fact that
No,
they
he
were
didn't.
looking at it either. He didn't deny it.
Not at all. No, he didn't. And that was really interesting actually because I saw that as well. And he was a little bit and again, Ivan is very hard to read. He's not one of those easy coaches to read. He's a little bit like a Wayne Bennett, where he's not easy to read. But he didn't deny it. And if they've got room in the cap, I'd love to see it happen just so we can kind of see what that would look like. But again, I'm not too sure.
Your question, look, let's say Jerome Hughes decides to leave the Melbourne Storm at the end of this year or next year, whenever that option is.
Yeah.
You see DCE landing in Melbourne for a year to help a Jonah Pezzett work on his
Mhm.
game, and eventually you get Jonah Pezzett going in there in the 7.
Yeah, that. Honestly, it's a good shout. It's a good shout, and it's something I think. I think DCE obviously already an elite player. He's an Origin star. He's an Australian star. But under Craig Bellamy, DCE, and Cameron Munster, like I think favorites, easy favorites to win the comp. I think he'd be excellent for a guy like Jonah Pezzett to come through. Um, Honestly, it's not a bad shout. Again, it does have implications with obviously DCE's family. Does he want to uproot him out of Sydney? And if so, would he be wanting to go back home to Queensland? There are a few issues with that. But purely for just looking at it footy wise, I think it's honestly probably one of the best decisions. If Jerome Hughes were to pick an option to leave the club, it would be very interesting. Yeah.
Talking about DCE replacements, mate. Um,
Mm.
who are some of the guys that are coming up at the moment?
Look, the loudest whispers that I'm kind of hearing at the moment is Jamal Fogarty from the Raiders. He's the biggest one that I'm hearing at the moment, and he's the one that makes the most sense as well. Ricky Stewart's come out and he's also kind of said, "I'm not going to stand in his way if he does need to leave." If that is supposed to be a little push in the door or a hint as to what's going to come, I'm not too sure, but it definitely kind of points towards potentially Manly looking at. Bringing in, a Jamal Fogarty. And I kind of found that the most interesting thing about this whole saga, as you would know, and a lot of Manly fans would kind of be, spewing over at the moment, is that Manly have just let go of Latu Fainu and Jamie Humphries. So they've let go of these two guys who are both, set to be elite halves in the competition. And so it kind of does point towards the fact that Manly weren't aware that DCE was looking to leave. So the fact that they've lost these kind of, two guys, they probably will need to recruit elsewhere. So the biggest thing I'm hearing is Jamal Fogarty. I'm also hearing whispers about them potentially wanting to go grab Lachlan Galvin, although I don't know how much that would kind of come to fruition. But the biggest thing right now, probably bringing in Jamal Fogarty.
I've been hearing whispers about Adam Reynolds, mate. What are the
Mm.
chances of Adam Reynolds going to the Manly Seagulls?
I can't. I'm not seeing. I don't think it's very likely. I've heard whispers about it, but again, it's not. I think he's pretty settled in over in Brisbane. I can't see him leaving. Yeah, it's not something that I think, especially kind of in his the twilight years of his career, Adam Reynolds. I don't see him leaving the Brisbane Broncos, who are obviously in premiership contention. He's the captain of the club, and he's come out on multiple occasions saying how much he loves the club and that he doesn't want to leave. So I can't see him heading over to Manly. I do think Manly would love to have him, but I also think at the end of the day, it is a bit of a stopgap as well. And if you weren't willing to offer DCE the contract that he wanted maybe a few months ago, depending on how true that is, if you weren't willing to offer it to DCE, are you willing to offer it to Adam Reynolds, who has, been a little bit more injury prone than a DCE, hasn't been as available as a DCE? I do think that Manly would prefer to bring in either a Jamal Fogarty. If they could bring in a Lachlan Galvin, obviously bring him in as well. I don't see Reynolds in Manly colours from 2026 onwards.
He'd probably be more likely to retire, right? I think that,
Yeah.
Reynolds looking at his body, looking at the injuries over the past few years, it probably makes more sense for Reno to hang up the
Absolutely.
boots, potentially take up a coaching option over
Yeah.
there in Brisbane as well.
Mhm.
Mate, what's next on the list?
Okay, so this one's an interesting one, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on it. Um, Matty Johns has recommended a shock positional switch for Dylan Brown. So obviously, everyone knows before this whole DCE thing, the biggest talking point in the NRL was Dylan Brown and his 10-year contract with the Knights starting next year. Now, Matty Johns has made a recommendation for Brown, as he has been struggling, for him to move into the number 13 jumper. So, suggesting that Dylan Brown should move to lock. He's come out and he's basically said he believes that, a lot of pressure is on Dylan Brown at the moment to perform, obviously with that huge $13 million contract with the Knights. He thinks that he should move to lock and potentially simplify his game, and probably move Volkman and Hawkins into the halves instead. So an interesting one. It's a very interesting suggestion. I don't know how much it would help Brown's game, but it is definitely an interesting recommendation for Brown over at Parramatta.
I think this just hurts. I think it hurts Dylan Brown, to be honest. I mean that his most greatest attribute is his running game for sure, and that would make sense for him to move into that lock forward position in just purely looking at it from a running game sense. But you're looking at Hawkins and Volkman and what they've done in the halves in their opportunities in those set weeks. I know that Hawkins has been there for 2 weeks and
Yeah.
Volkman about the same time, but it hasn't been great. There's been a lack of direction there. Brown hasn't really done the best to, provide that direction as well. It sort of worries you a little bit moving over to the Newcastle Knights. That's the case still. We're at round 4, round 5 now, and that's the case. But look, I think that it would be interesting. I just don't think that it helps Brown at all. And I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to the form of the Parramatta Eels at the moment and the fact that Brown is leaving. Maybe they just want to move him out of that position. But you got to remember, like Brown's still on 800, 900K at the Parramatta Eels. He's still a high-value player. I probably wouldn't be making that change to what is one of the game's best 5'8" when he's on. So I think they've just got to wait it out until Moses gets back. I know it's a pretty indefinite sort of period until Moses gets back on the field. Have you heard anything regarding a return date for Mitch Moses yet?
It's honestly question marks everywhere. I don't think anyone knows when Mitchell Moses is coming in. The, the 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 thing with Moses is because of the rarity of his injury, like it's in his foot, and he's not a lot of blood flow goes there as it is, and it's one of those injuries where you don't know it's right until it's completely right. So, look, I've heard round 6, I've heard round 10. No one really knows when Moses is coming back. But I completely agree with what you said. It's a knee jerk reaction, and it's something that it won't help Brown, but it also won't help Parramatta. They've got, obviously, like you said, Ronald Volkman, and they've got Dean Hawkins. They've got 24 games of NRL experience between the both. Dylan Brown is their most experienced half at the club, and while they're waiting for Mitch Moses to come back, they're better off just leaving Brown in the halves and letting him figure it out. He's one of the best 5'8" in the comp, like you said. And with them not knowing when Mitch Moses will come back in, it only puts more pressure on Hawkins and Volkman to perform. So I would be leaving it as is and hope that they figure it out. They're clearly in a very big rebuild at the moment as well. I don't think moving Dylan Brown into a position that he doesn't normally play and having two halves who have very little NRL experience into the halves will help Parramatta in any way.
I agree. And look, mate, to be honest, I'd much rather move Josh Papali'i into the halves with Brown than make a change here from moving Brown into that 13 jersey. I think that Josh Papali'i, he has been carving up in reserve grade at the moment. You can play him in a bit of roaming role, play very unorthodox, and just really focus on the attack. And then Brown, I guess, will have to get you out of trouble with the kicking game. But I think that would probably be a better option than to put Brown into a 13 jumper, completely just take out his kicking game and can specifically work on the running game at the moment. I mean, we've seen what that's done. I know that Humphreys is probably a lot better of a kicker, but Humphreys moved into lock a week ago against the Sharks, and the kicking game was just completely gone. They were under a ton of pressure. I think that you've got to. I think this is more from an experience sense, as you said. Leave Brown in the halves, leave him in the 6 jersey, let him figure it out. Potentially bring Josh Papali'i, who is a right side specialist, into that halfback jersey, more so as a runner, similar to what Tyron Wishart did for the Melbourne
Mhm.
Storm on the weekend, and just try and figure it out more so from an attacking sense, play very attacking football. Let Lomax roam as well, get an extra set of eyes in there. Dylan
Mhm.
Walker coming in, I think, is going to be huge for them as well. I think that he should be available to play as of this week. So I think that that's probably going to be massive for them, even if they don't make any changes. Just having that extra set of eyes in Walker who can facilitate, and all the favors that he's done for Metcalf in the trial period and leading into the opening weeks of the competition as well, just in regards to being that extra set of eyes and hands. I think that that's great. What are your thoughts on Dylan Walker coming in, mate? And where do you think he's going to have much impact at the Parramatta Reels in that sense?
Look, I love the signing. To be honest, I think, look, Dylan Walker's not the player that he once was. I think we all know that, but I think that Parramatta, they just need another experienced head in there. And as we're talking about, Dylan Brown moving to lock, you bring Dylan Walker in as your lock to kind of steady the attack a little bit and shore up in the middle. I think it's something that helps Parramatta in the short term as much as the long term, because you're kind of helping the young guys kind of coming through, having an experienced guy like him, obviously with a junior bowler as well. Having a few experienced heads in that pack. You're not going to be winning any games anytime soon. You're not going to be making the finals anytime soon. So getting in those older experienced guys to kind of mentor and show the young guys around, I think it's huge for Parramatta. And even if it doesn't result in wins now, I think that the experience and the knowledge that Walker kind of brings on, as well as shoring up the attack a little bit, I think it helps Parramatta a lot in the long term. And I think it kind of makes this argument a little bit moot as well. Obviously, like, you bring him in the 13 role, I think he plays a really good link man role, and it kind of simplifies Dylan Brown's game even further and allows him to use his running game a little bit more, because, as you said, that's his best attribute.
So what are you doing with Hopgood then? If we're starting Dylan Walker at 13, are you moving Hopgood into the front row? Are you going to move Hopgood to an edge? What are we
Look,
doing?
I'd be chucking Hopgood into the front row personally. I know he's been awesome for them at lock, but again, I feel that Dylan Brown is struggling as it is as a half, and I think that he needs someone to kind of come in and shore up that attack a little bit. And not to say that Hopgood hasn't been good, he has, but if you want a couple, two big men in the front row, you got Junior Bolo, and you could put Hopgood in there as well, and then you chuck in a Dylan Walker into the 13 role. I think it shores up your attack and your defense a lot more. And if it doesn't work out, or if it's not easing off the pressure for Dylan Brown, you chuck Dylan Walker into the 14 role and you bring Hopgood back into the 13. But I definitely think it's worth chucking in Dylan Walker in at 13.
Will be interesting to see how much that impacts the Parramatta Reels. What's the next update on the list, mate?
Yeah. So there has been talk about Josh Papali'i from the Canberra Raiders potentially moving to the Super League next year. So clubs were already kind of aware in the last couple of weeks that Papali'i could potentially be moving to the Super League. But it has now been reported that St. Helens have reached out to his management to inquire about his services from 2026 onwards.
I think that this is pretty similar to Renault, mate. I think that he's probably going to retire at the end of this year. What are your general thoughts about it?
Look, I don't mind it for St. Helens. I don't mind it. They've got a few kind of international players, leaving the club at the moment. They've got Moses Mbai, Curtis Sonnen, Ignatius Parsi. They're all off contract by the end of this year. They've also got Morgan Knowles heading over to the Dolphins next year. So they've got quite a few players leaving the club. So from a St. Helens perspective, I do like the signing. He's obviously still a serviceable front rower, and I think he would be great for them. In terms of Papali'i, do I think he'll retire? I'm not too sure. I do think he's probably got 1 or 2 seasons left in him, the 32-year-old. And I do see him potentially going over to St. Helens. Now, I know obviously it's hard to imagine him out of a Canberra Raiders jersey. He's been there, for over a decade. So, but with Tarpanay and Horsburgh, obviously Horsburgh's playing 13 at the moment, but Tarpanay and Horsburgh, they've got a lot of young middles coming through. I do see the Raiders potentially wanting to shave off his $800,000 contract. So I do see him potentially going over to St. Helens. I do think it'll be an interesting move for both parties, but definitely a good one for St. Helens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the move either, and I think that Papali'i's still a great front rower, as you said. The only thing for me, and the only reason I bring up retirement is because it took him a long while to decide on that option. He had a player
Mhm.
option for this year, whether he wanted to continue or not, and it took him till I think January to make the decision. So yeah, I mean, that's probably the only reason as to why I'd sort of suspect retirement, but. I think that he'd do a great job in the Super League. Depends on him and his family and what they want to do as well. But there's no doubt that he'd do a really good job over there.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
what's the next news update?
Yeah, so kind of circling back to the whole DCE saga, Jake Jaboyevich has come out and kind of spoken about DCE deciding to leave and the implications for the club. So he's come out and his choice of words were quite interesting. So he basically came out and he's admitted that it kind of does look bad for the club. Admitting that this isn't a great look for the club. The whole saga with DCE and management. But he has also solidified his stance with the club and hopes to be captaining the club from next year onwards. So he has come out. He has denied all suggestions that he would be also leaving the club. He said that he wants to stay as the captain from next year onwards, and he honestly says that he doesn't really care what DCE does. It doesn't change anything for him, and that he can't imagine playing against Manly ever in his career.
Well, look, I think they said it on levels the other week, mate. I think that if Jurbo retired, he'd probably go and play for the Monavale Raiders the
Yeah.
following year. Like he's not a guy that would go against Manly too often, and it's great to hear from your captain as well, especially with all of the noise, all of the speculation around certain players. I think it is really great to hear that you get a guy like Jurbo, captain of the club, coming out and saying, "Nah, I'm committed to Manly. I want to win a comp for Manly. I want to be the captain of the Manly Seagulls." I think that that's really, really good to hear. And look, he's a serviceable veteran. The interesting thing for me for Jurbo is I don't know how much longer he's going to be in the 13 jersey for the Manly Seagulls. I think that he'll still play for the Manly Seagulls and he'll probably play for another 2, 3 years. I just don't know how much of that time is going to be spent in the 13. I just think that he's not as mobile and he's not as effective in that 13 jersey as he previously was, in my opinion. I feel like there is a real opportunity to move him into the front row with Jazz Savunga at the club. But regardless, I think that I love Jake Trbojevic coming out and having that allegiance and pledging that allegiance to the Manly Seagulls.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I agree with the fact that I don't see him staying in that 13 role either. He's not as mobile as he once was, and I think he's much better suited to the front row. But no, it's awesome. It's awesome that he's kind of come out and straight away solidified his stance. I did find it interesting. Obviously, DCE and Jurbo have been playing together for years, and the fact that he's kind of come out and admitted it looks bad for the club. But he doesn't care what DCE does. He's staying with the club. It does kind of imply that was there a rift between DCE and management, potentially the playing group? The fact that he hasn't essentially come out and ignored the noise, but instead kind of admitted, yeah, it does look bad. It does make me think, was there some kind of rift? Was there some kind of conflict, whether including Jake Jaboyevich or something that he was aware of. So I did think his choice of words were really interesting. But regardless, if you're a Manly fan, this is what you wanted to hear. This is absolutely kind of what you're looking for from your next captain. Um, it's very easy to kind of get lost in all the noise and potentially even follow it for some of these players. But the fact that he's come out and said this, it obviously speaks volumes to how much the club means to him. And it sets Manly up well for the next couple of years as well, because obviously when your captain, being DCE, has left on such a public note, it can kind of deter players from wanting to come to that club, thinking that there may be some kind of issues with management over there. But, Jurbo coming out and making clear, nope, I love this club. I will never be leaving. It kind of solidifies that potentially, the conflict was simply between DCE and management, and that it's still a club worth coming to and worth playing for. So it's great comments from Jurbo, and it's really interesting to kind of see his perspective on it.
100%, mate. I totally agree with everything you just said. I think that there'd definitely be a little bit of animosity between a DCE and the club, but in regards to animosity between DCE and the playing group, I think that if there was animosity there between DCE and the playing group, they wouldn't have played the way they did on the weekend. And um, I think that yeah, DCE. I think that he is going to be looked up upon in regard with all of the players that he's playing with at the moment there. He's done a lot of service for the Manly Seagulls. A lot of those guys would look up to him there. So I think that DCE is definitely in regards to the relationship with him in the playing group. I think they are going to end on a pretty decent note. But yeah, in regards to DCE and the management of the Manly Seagulls, you'd have to think there'd be a level of animosity there for sure. Mate, let's move on. What's next?
So we've got our last headline for today. So it was actually, and something I found pretty interesting and something you don't hear very often, but it was Ivan Cleary's comments in his press conference following their third straight loss last week, Penrith third straight loss. Basically taking accountability for their loss, saying that he's responsible, and calling the loss comical. He actually found it funny, just the way that they went about that loss. And so a few of his comments were really interesting. He came out and he pinpointed the fact, they made errors, they couldn't defend them, and then found new ways to make those errors. And said that he's never seen Penrith play a half as bad as their first half in that match last week. But again, he's come out and he said that, he feels he needs to take responsibility. But also said that fans haven't seen the real Penrith yet, and that they're still warming up, and that no alarm bells are ringing for Penrith at the moment. So a few interesting comments in there. Obviously, not the type of press conference you'd normally get from the four-time premiership winning coach, but definitely a few interesting things to take from that.
You'd have to think that they have an eye towards September, like they did last year. I mean, last year was a pretty up and down year. There were certainly a few more losses in there. Yeah, they were playing a lot better footy to start the season, and it's the first time we've sort of seen Penrith in the past few years have this sort of record to start a year as well, and especially between teams that they should be beating. It does raise a few alarm bells in that sense. I do take a lot of positives out of their performance against the Melbourne Storm, though. I think that what they were able to do without Cleary in that game, you definitely got to take a few notes, and it speaks volumes of Penrith. I think that the performance against South Sydney, though, you do have a few question marks. Like, it's the first time you've seen Yo make mistakes and make errors like that, throwing forward passes. You definitely do have to ask a few questions, but I also think, like, the past few weeks, Edwards hasn't been playing to his best. He's been playing injured. He's only recently just pulled out with that groin injury, and he's going to spend the next few weeks off. Cleary's out as well. You're losing a lot of direction there. It's the first time when Cleary was in that he had to, pretty much run the side on his own, and there's a lot of pressure and onus on Nathan Cleary to run the team. I think the performance from Cole in the game against Melbourne probably raises more positives than negatives in regards to when Cleary comes back, because you can see that Cole can take that pressure off. He can run the side, which I think is really, really good. So I think that once they build that combination, if that's the combination that we're going to see from Penrith, that Cole and Cleary combo, once Edwards comes back and he's fully fit as well, I think that they will start winning games a lot better. I think that the forward pack, there's a lot of positives there. Liam Henry's had some good games. Lindsay Smith is an absolute freak. Got a little bit of a Jimmy step that he's got that he tried to debut against South Sydney as well. But Leota as well, he stood up in the absence of Fisher Harris. I think that you can definitely take a few positives. There's definitely a lot of negatives and a lot of question marks around the Penrith Panthers to start the year. But I also think there's a few positives, and there's a few things that you can look to and little hints that we've seen from their previous games where, when Cleary does come back, when Edwards does come back, they're full strength. They'll be able to do a lot. And look, it's interesting to see Cleary, I guess, take that responsibility. And the comments used in that press conference, definitely a little bit interesting there. But I think that he just has an eye towards September for me. I think that it's all eyes on September. What are your thoughts, mate? What are your thoughts on the comments and Penrith's start to the year?
Look, honestly, and I completely agree with you. Like, I don't even think, I don't think Cleary's taking this, to heart, taking it too seriously. I think that, after winning 4 premierships, yeah, okay, this is the first time they've lost 3 in a row, and it can kind of be worrying. But like you said, like they've had Dylan Edwards injured, they've had Cleary injured, they've got a rookie half in there. They're missing half their spine essentially. So I don't think it's alarm bells. I think obviously it wasn't the best performance against the Bunnies, but like you said, you point towards that Melbourne game where you did have young guys like Cole stepping up, and it is good signs pointing towards the future. I think obviously once they've got their full strength side back in action, gelling together, if they're still losing, then fine. I think alarm bells can start ringing. But for now, no. I think when you've won four premierships, you know how to win. And I think that fans who are writing them off or kind of saying they're not even top four worthy after these past few games, I think it's ridiculous. I think that Penrith, they have systems in place to combat, these slumps, and every side goes through them. You've got to remember, Penrith have, played, in every grand final since 2020. They have played, nearly a full year's worth every single year. That has implications on the body, and players are fatigued. Guys like Isaiah Yeo, who you saw making mistakes that they don't normally make. Guys like Moses Leota, these older guys who have been playing in grand finals for half a decade. They're fatigued, and when you don't have a guy like Cleary out there, you don't have a guy like Dylan Edwards, and also getting used to not having Jerome Luai out there. All these things, they result in losses, but I definitely don't think it's alarm bells ringing for Ivan Cleary or the Panthers. I think that once we get to the middle of this season and they got their full squad back, if they're still struggling, question marks need to be asked. But for now, no, I think they're sweet, and I think honestly, they're better off going through the slump now than later in the season.
100%, mate. 100%. Well, look, thank you for hopping on
Too
for
easy.
the episode of Breaking Bread. We're going to do this every week. It's going to come out on a Tuesday, audio version, 7 a.m. We'll get the videos out by 4 p.m. on that day. But yeah, thanks for hopping on, mate, and keen to see you next week and go through the next lot of NRL rumors and news.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, man.